A warning for women who use Uber, which advertises itself as a safe ride home. A CNN investigation finds more than 100 drivers have been accused of sexual assault or abuse in the last 4 years, and it's a problem the $70 billion transportation giant Uber has gone to great lengths to keep quiet.
Please welcome Rachel Hibbert, Joy Marshall, Addison Hoover, and Stephanie Nahn, along with their attorney, Gene Christensen. A heartbreaking and shocking snippet there.
Absolutely. I remember everything that happened to me, having to fear for my life.
But just to jump back, you get into the car.
Right.
You're taking an Uber like everybody has done so many times.
I was going from my boyfriend's house to my twin's house. And that's only 13 minutes away. And he's done it before. I mean, he was so calm, and he just told me, no, you're coming with me. When he passed my sister's exit, and then I begged him to get off at the next one, he just put his hand on my shoulder, and I remember him just coming down and holding my hand and saying, no, you're coming with me. And that's when I knew that this was serious. And
then how? And did he force you into his apartment, or where did he take you?
Oh, yes. He forced me into his apartment. He walked behind me the whole time. He raped me. And then afterward, I had to convince him and make him feel comfortable enough to take me back. And I don't know, by the graces of the universe, and I don't know who was watching me that day, but I was able to get to my sister's and get him to walk me to the corner. And as soon as I got to her driveway, I bolted to go run to her house. And as I turned the corner, she was there with police officers. And I just remember embracing her and saying, get that man, he just raped me.
It's a locked box with a stranger. And the difference is, in the car, he's in control, and you're not. I know you believe the night you were attacked, Rachel, that you had been drugged.
Correct.
But not by him, right? Are you
Correct.
saying, like,
Yeah.
you were at a bar and you feel like somebody slipped you a Mickey?
Yeah.
So you do what many of us would consider the responsible thing, which is get a ride home. You didn't get behind the wheel of a car. You didn't stumble out on your own. You get into a car. And what happened?
On my Uber app, it showed that he had dropped me off at some gas station 40 minutes after me getting in his car. He didn't pull up into my house until 4:30 in the morning, so I was in his car for 2.5 hours. Luckily, I had my phone on me, and at some point, my friends were calling me quite a bit because I'm a mom of 3. Like, I don't go out. So it's not normal for me. So they're expecting me home at a certain time. And because I wasn't, they had made several phone calls. I was able to get to my phone and say hello. There's a lot of wrestling, and then I think he would hang it up. So eventually he took me home. The friend I was living with at the time was outside when he took me home, and he wasn't expecting that. So when I got up to get out, my friend came over and was like, what did you do to her? Because I obviously looked like I had been in a fight or something. And the Uber driver sped off and kicked me out of the car like 2 blocks down the road. And, left. And the hard part for me is I don't know my story because Uber hasn't given me the opportunity to find out. They haven't released the driver's information to the detective at all. So for 2 years, I've been waiting to find out who this person was and what happened to me.
What?
And Uber has refused and has not responded at all.
So you don't know who this man is?
No. And from my understanding, when we look at the app and the other ladies are in the same position, men are still driving for Uber. Uber's response to me at first was, I'm sorry, I won't pair you with this driver, to which I said, it needs to be more than that. I'm filing a criminal case. I want to pursue this person. Okay, we'll have someone call you. And never got a phone call.
Right, so these men are still driving, and we don't know
driving.
what woman is getting into their back seat right now.
Yeah.
But there's a reason they're here. There's a reason they're here. They can't get a public forum with Uber. Uber's shutting that down, which is why they've come directly to you, and they have a message for Uber you need to hear after this break. We are back now with 4 women who say they were sexually assaulted by Uber drivers. We reached out to Uber. Overnight, they gave us this statement that reads, our hearts go out to the victims. Sexual assault has no place anywhere, and we want to do our part to end this violence. We recently strengthened our safety approach with new features, including an emergency button, driver screening improvements, and the addition of the former Secretary of Homeland Security to head up Uber's Safety Advisory Board. This is just a start, and we're committed to doing even more. Is that true, Gene? Do you believe that?
Unfortunately, no. Jay Johnson's there now, and if they're serious about making changes, the first step would be to end forced arbitration.
And so forced arbitration is basically, you guys never willingly agreed to arbitration. You just clicked on the Uber app, right?
Right. Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, you know how it's like you agree to Uber's terms and conditions. And you have to check that box to get through virtually any website now. And now they're saying because of that all these women have to arbitrate any claims that they have. They can't litigate them in court in front of a jury, have to go to an arbitrator in private.
Confidential arbitration, correct, where they will be able to prevent all the data and all the evidence about all these instances that we know have taken place and keep them secret. People need to remember that Uber claims it's a global company that's all about transparency and all about doing the right thing. And if it really is going to do the right thing, then it needs to disclose to all of us, and especially women, just what they are signing up for when they click that.
And what the histories of this driver are. I want to know what's his history and how thorough are these criminal background checks. That's what Pamela Anderson has been saying, that she doesn't think that they are thorough enough. Thank you all for telling your stories. We'll continue to follow it, and all the best to you. I know this just happened, so all the best to you in your healing.
The safest mobility platform on earth, and you've seen some of the moves that we made on the safety front in terms of driver screening and making sure that anyone who drives on the platform, they're checked out, they're safe, etc.
Uber and Lyft are shutting down their operations in Austin, Texas this morning after losing a battle over background checks. The city will require on-demand drivers to get fingerprinted. Voters rejected Uber and Lyft's proposal to self-regulate.
Hey, where are you off to?
Some conference in Cleveland.
Oh yeah, who with?
With Cooper.
Cooper.
Who's naughty on this plane?
This guy.
How much do you make?
Right there. Yes, it's not as much as I make, I'll tell you that much right now.
Sort by shortest flights. Another way Expedia makes it easy to find the trip you're looking for.
Opportunity is everywhere. Like here.
That's good. Thank you.
Where the only thing that separates you is your ambition.
Uber tells CBS this morning, quote, disappointment does not begin to describe how we feel about shutting down operations in Austin. And Lyft tells us this, the rules don't allow true ride sharing to operate. CBS News financial contributor Melody Hobson is in San Francisco and joins us to discuss. So, Melody, why does Austin want the fingerprinting, and why are Uber and Lyft against it?
Well, it's pretty simple. First of all, they say together, and they have a similar statement, that this slows down their process because this is a city-run process, this fingerprinting effort, and it'll make it harder for them to hire drivers quickly. But the real issue, I talked to a source at Uber, it's back to the same slippery slope about their business model and not wanting this to lead to these contract workers being considered employees, which would completely upend their business model. They would then be looking at benefits and a total different profit model, and that's not something that they want, and they want to fight fiercely against it.
Some questioning whether a ride in an Uber car is a safe one. Uber's screening doesn't check the FBI's criminal database, like many taxi companies do. Uber outsources its background checks. San Francisco is suing Uber. District Attorney George Gascon saying the screenings are inadequate because they don't include fingerprinting.
If you read their website, there's all this language about how they're striving to make this a very safe experience for the rider. And then when you start reading the small print, you can see that basically Uber is completely walking away from any liability.
Stephanie?
Luis?
Hola.
Opportunity is everywhere. Like here, where you can explore the world, knowing you can always find your way home.
The moment court began, it was clear Darnell Booth was not happy. And when he heard the charges against him, he collapsed.
One person is Darnell K. Booth, one charge of rape. Mr. Booth, 12.
Prosecutors say Booth met a 16-year-old girl as her Uber driver, but then began to message her on Snapchat. They say he pursued her, picked her up again a few days later, then raped her.
He pulled into a parking lot. At that point, he turned and told her to take off her pants.
But watch his reaction to the next allegation.
At that point, he leaned over from the driver's seat and slapped her in the face on 2 occasions.
Booth has an 8-page criminal history, including 1 prior sexual assault allegation for which he was never arrested. This time, investigators found his DNA on the girl's shirt. But his attorney says the girl's story may not add up.
I have received a police report, and I've listened to the statement of probable cause, and I would suggest that there are far more questions than answers.
And we should mention that Booth was not working as an Uber driver during the time of that alleged rape. Uber has now permanently banned him as a driver and said that any of his prior criminal history was
legitimate business purposes. So as we discovered 24 hours before, they included legitimate business purposes, included going through my garbage and having me followed. So I don't have a lot of confidence in what Uber considers a legitimate business purpose.
Let me push back just a little bit. Did they actually go through with the plan to go through your garbage and follow your kids, or was it just merely suggested at the dinner?
Look, as far as I know, they haven't, but I don't know.
Okay.
I have no way of knowing.
And do you think this is something that's pervasive of Uber's company culture, or is this a couple of employees who are out of line?
You know what? I think it's somewhere between the two. I used to take Uber for a long time, and for a long time, we've started raising questions about this company's ethics and morality since 2012, which is one of the reasons I was the one targeted. And I still used the ride-sharing app up until recently because I really liked a lot of the drivers I interacted with. And I thought even though Travis Kalanick is obviously morally corrupted and has a board who will not stand up to him, I thought in spite of that they were doing some good in the world, and I did really like some of the things that they were doing.
They say they're employing 50,000 new people every month.
Right. But at this point, we have all covered startups long enough to know that culture comes from the top. And the senior executive sets a tone. And what we see over and over again, when Uber gets in these PR messes, they never fire anyone responsible. Now, what message does that send if you're at the company? I get rewarded for taking more risks that frequently involve putting women's lives in danger. What's happening now is the biggest Uber scandal because none of the other stuff has ever been checked.
A former engineer is going public with what she says is a frequent problem inside Uber: sexual harassment and sexism. She describes the company as an organization in chaos. And this morning, the CEO of Uber says he hears her and he's taking action.
But don't think that you, a woman, even a queen, can walk into the council chamber and sway the minds of men. I own that chamber, as if it were built with these hands.
Engineer Susan Fowler joined Uber for what she called the opportunity to work with some of the best engineers around. But within weeks of arriving in 2015, Fowler says her direct supervisor made unwanted advances. In a blog post on Sunday, Fowler wrote, "My new manager sent me a string of messages over company chat. It was clear he was trying to get me to have sex with him."
I could crush the life out of you right now. You will go before the council, but your words will fall on deaf ears. Do you love your Sparta?
Yes,
And your king?
I do.
Fowler says she immediately took screenshots of these chat messages and reported them to Uber Human Resources. But she claims upper management tried to sweep her complaint under the rug, calling her supervisor a high performer and saying they wouldn't feel comfortable punishing him because it was, quote, this man's first offense and probably just an innocent mistake on his part. Yep.
What do you have to offer? This will not be over quickly. You will not enjoy this.
CEO Travis Kalanick calling the alleged behavior abhorrent and against everything Uber stands for and believes in, adding that anyone who behaves this way or thinks this is okay will be fired.
Ride-hailing company Uber has fired at least 20 employees following an investigation into sexual harassment and discrimination allegations. The company announced the firings on June 6th and noted it was improving its management training. KGO-TV reported sources saying the firings including senior executives in the company.
What queen-like behavior. Remove her from this chamber before she infects us further with her inglorious and shabby self.
This will not be over quickly. You will not enjoy this.
Uber CEO Travis Kalanick resigning overnight amid recent scandals. Our chief business correspondent Rebecca Jarvis has been on it from the very beginning, has the latest details. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning to you, Robin. And just last week, Uber CEO told employees that he would be taking a temporary leave to become the leader that this company needs and that you deserve. But this morning, under pressure, Kalanick announcing his departure is permanent.
Meantime, Lyft is following in Uber's footsteps tonight. Both ride-sharing companies will now allow riders, drivers, and passengers with claims of sexual assault to pursue their cases in open court. This news comes after a CNN investigation found more than 100 Uber drivers in the U.S. have been accused of sexually assaulting or abusing their passengers.
This morning, Uber is announcing a major policy change on how it handles sexual assault and harassment cases. The ride-sharing giant will end the practice of mandatory arbitration starting today. It had forced accusers to mediate their claims in secret. Those who agree to settlements will not be required to sign confidentiality agreements. Uber will also disclose data on sexual assaults and other incidents. Last week, we spoke to the company's CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, about its stance on confidentiality.
We have no interest in closing down a person's freedom to voice their experience or voice their concerns. So I think one thing that you will certainly see from us is that to the extent you go to arbitration and you want to talk about your experiences or what happened, we're absolutely fine with that.
Tony West is Uber's chief legal officer and was an associate attorney general during the Obama administration. He's here for an interview you'll see only on CBS this morning. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Let's first talk about this, because people who've studied the issue of sexual harassment, certainly in the workforce, know about the issue of arbitration.
That's
but for
right.
the non-lawyers out there, explain what it does.
So basically, arbitration is a way to litigate or mediate your claims, resolve your claims outside of a court process. Sometimes it's much cheaper than, less expensive than going to court. But the reality is that it's not the right form for all types of claims. And when it comes to sexual assault, sexual harassment, one of the things we learn is it's very important to make sure that survivors have control and agency, and we want to be able to give them the choice of form.
Women have claimed that arbitration in their workforce have kept these reports of sexual harassment private. Right. That you just did a settlement, it's done, nothing changes in the company. Right. So what's Uber doing to change that?
So a couple of things. First, we are not requiring individuals who settle their claims with Uber to sign any kind of confidentiality agreement or NDA, non-disclosure agreement, that would prevent them from telling their stories if they choose. We think that decision ought to reside with the survivor. We're also saying that when it comes to choosing whether a survivor wants to mediate her claims or arbitrate or even go to open court, that choice should be the survivor's as well.
Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Entrepreneur, and Uber has done the unthinkable today, and they have decided to put an end to forced arbitration if you're an individual. I didn't think this was going to happen, but apparently Uber has had a change of heart. They have decided to end forced arbitration for victims of sexual assault in the Uber rides. Granted, there are some catches to this, the most notable being that this is only for individuals, not for class action lawsuits, because of course Uber's not going to completely put an end to something that, basically covers up they're doing something wrong. So according to TechCrunch, In a major policy change for its U.S. operations, Uber has announced it's ending mandatory arbitration for individual claims of sexual assault or sexual harassment by Uber drivers, riders, or employees. It is also ending the requirement that victims sign a confidentiality provision preventing them from speaking about the sexual assault or sexual harassment they suffered, saying survivors will now have the option to settle their claims with Uber without having to agree to being publicly silent in order to do so, which I want to add, that should always be the case. You should always have the right to sue your employer if they do something wrong or if something wrong happens at their hands. Uber's appallingly bad screening process, which does not include fingerprinting, does not go through the FBI system. Of course it invites these problems, but let's continue. Last month, a group of women alleging sexual violence from Uber drivers sent an open letter to the company's board asking to be released from the mandatory arbitration clause in the Uber's app's terms of service. Former Uber engineer Susan Fowler, who was instrumental in highlighting internal problems with sexual harassment and sexism at Uber when she blogged about her experience at the company last year, also urged CEO Dara K. I thought I would try to pronounce his name, I'm just not that comfortable yet doing so, to end the policy. And in a Twitter exchange in March, Dara signaled he was willing to consider ending forced arbitration. Quote, I will take it seriously, but we have to take all of our constituents into consideration, he wrote to Fowler then. Concerns about safety in Uber's attitude to reported serious crimes were also among the reasons identified by London's transport regulator for withdrawing Uber's license to operate in the UK capital last September. Although safety transparency measures also being announced by Uber today appear limited to the US market for now, Uber has committed to publishing what it describes as a, quote, safety transparency report, which it says will include data on sexual assaults and other incidents that occur as a result of the activity on the platform. Announcing the moves in a blog post today entitled Turning the Lights On, Uber's chief legal officer Tony West writes that the company has committed to doing, quote, the right thing. I'm being very, very sarcastic. Uber never does the right thing. Under its new CEO. A new attitude which requires 3 key elements: transparency, integrity, and accountability. Describing sexual violence as, quote, a huge problem globally, he continues, the last 18 months have exposed a silent epidemic of sexual assault and harassment that haunts every industry and every community. Uber is not immune in this deeply rooted problem, and we believe that it is up to us to be a big part of the solution. Commenting on Uber's policy changes to end mandatory arbitration, Jeannie Christensen, a partner at New York-based law firm Wigder LLP, which filed a class action lawsuit against Uber last year on behalf of women who said they were assaulted or raped by Uber drivers, described it as a critical step to, quote, reduce future suffering by women passengers. But she also flagged Uber's decision to not end forced arbitration for groups of victims acting on a class basis, saying this shows the company is not fully committed to meaningful change. And why would they? Because here's the thing. Most people who sue Uber, let's be honest, it's in a class action setting. It's usually not personal. People don't have that kind of money to just do it by themselves. But you get a bunch of people together in a class action lawsuit, that can go through easily. Those are the cases that will not be made public. And of course it makes sense because the individual who can't afford to sue Uber individually, their stories are not heard. So Uber is not concerned about their stories being heard by ending the forced arbitration. But the class action lawsuit, you can get a bunch of people together. All their stories can be heard. Uber is still very much afraid of that one.
Spartans! Lay down your weapons! Come and get them!
Opportunity is everywhere. Like here, where you can explore the world.
The study surveyed more than 1,000 Uber and Lyft drivers nationwide, and it says 30% of drivers are actually losing money, and 74% earn less than the minimum wage.
Dara Khosrowshahi, of course, is the CEO of Uber, and he joins me here. Welcome. It's good to see you. So you're in the news. I mean, let's start there. You're in the news today because there's a report that earlier in the year, Warren Buffett about an investment. Bloomberg says $3 billion. And then Warren did comment later on that he quit.
Stop here!
But it's true, Berkshire had this.
Who commands here?
What were those discussions?
I don't want to get into the particulars
necessary
of those.
I am the emissary
Warren said,
to the ruler of all the world,
the
God of gods,
I don't think the reporting was
King of kings. And by that authority, I demand that someone show me your commander. America! Page. America! God done shed his grace on me.
Go now. Run along and tell your Xerxes he faces free men here.
Save
not
it,
slaves.
brotherhood, from